Welcome, and thank you for joining us tonight. I am Jen Chandler, Director of Elders Climate Action, and we're excited that you're here for this special event. We'll get started talking about air pollution standards and the Congressional Review Act with Monty Jones from Climate Action Campaign in just a moment. First, I'd like to offer a special thank you to our partners at Climate Action Campaign and express our gratitude for our recent partner engagement grant, opening up access to a variety of resources, opportunities, and expertise for ECA, including today's speaker. I'd also like to thank our Breathe Again Collaborative partners for hosting this event. The collaborative includes People's Justice Council, Mothers Others for Clean Air, United Women in Faith, North Carolina Interfaith Power and Light, Alabama Interfaith Power and Light, Greater Birmingham Alliance to Stop Pollution, otherwise known as GASP, and Elders Climate Action. We're working together to advance understanding and advocacy at the intersection of air pollution, climate, and health. So if you're joining us from one of those organizations, thank you and welcome. I'd also like to acknowledge Ariana Jenna and Liz Tucker, our two staff consultants who are helping with both of these very important partnerships. And for those of you who are new to Elders Climate Action, we are grandparents and great uncles and great aunts like myself, and everyday folks who are determined to do all we can to leave a sustainable planet for future generations. Our programs, communications, and chapters seek to inform, inspire, and engage older generations to take action on the climate crisis at the local, state, and national levels. At ECA, we're elder-centered and we're volunteer-driven, so we hope that you will consider getting more involved with us. Tonight, this event will be 1 hour. We'll hear from our speaker, followed by a Q&A session, so please feel free to add your questions to our Q&A box. I would like to introduce Monty Jones from Climate Action Campaign. Monty grew up in New Hampshire and holds a Bachelor of Science in Chemistry from the University of St. Andrews, Scotland. He was a St. Andrews COP26 project coordinator, where he engaged the community in the UN Climate Change Conference and in the climate agenda. He was also the Scotia Group Fellow, working with global leaders to link the global rule of law with climate action. He worked on Congressman Chris Papa's successful re-election campaign in 2022 before moving to Washington, D.C. to join Climate Action Campaign. And I've had the distinctive privilege of meeting Monty in person last month in Washington, D.C., and working with him over this past month as we increase our partnership with the Climate Action Campaign. So I'm really excited to welcome Monty tonight. So Monty, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
And the EPA standards and understanding the Congressional Review Act. And so before we dive a little bit deeper, I wanted to talk a little bit more about Climate Action Campaign. So CAC is a vibrant coalition of a dozen major national environmental justice, and public health groups, including Earth Justice, NRDC, EDF, Center for American Progress, National Hispanic Association of Nurses, to name a few. And so our goal is really to drive ambitious, durable federal action based on climate science to address the climate crisis, and really to reduce climate pollution and accelerate the transition to clean energy and a sustainable society in ways that support justice, jobs, improved health, and quality of life for all. And so CAC, we have 3 main campaigns currently ongoing, but the main one that kind of reflects the work that we'll be talking about today is our Solutions for Pollution campaign that started back in August of 2022 after the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act. Some of you might have recalled that President Biden during 2020 election period promised to deliver on climate and public health. He pledged to cut climate pollution in half by 2030 and promised unprecedented resources for communities historically overburdened by pollution. The Inflation Reduction Act has got us part of the way, but Solutions for Pollution standards can help us deliver that 50 to 52 emission reduction that President Biden promised. And so the Solutions for Pollution campaign calls on the Biden administration to advance approximately 20 protective actions using all of its existing authority under bedrock environmental laws like the Clean Air Act to help make President Biden's vision and commitment a reality. And so together, these actions can cut climate pollution in half, protect public health, help meet environmental justice goals, accelerate the transition to clean energy, and create economic opportunity. And we currently have around 335 organizations that are part of the Solutions for Pollution Coalition. And so here's a list of some of the standards that we engage with that are part of our action plan for the Solution for Pollution. I'll start off with smog air quality standards, which limits ground level ozone pollution, which harms public health by causing difficulty in breathing and exacerbating asthma attacks, especially on hot, sunny days. We also have the soot air quality standards, which limits dangerous fine particulate pollution that triggers asthma attacks and leads to respiratory problems, heart attacks, and premature death. Next is carbon pollution standards, which limit carbon pollution from fossil fuel-fired power plants, which are responsible for 1/4 of US carbon pollution. The same statutory authority could also be used to set carbon pollution standards for industrial sources as well. Next is the Good Neighbor Air Quality Plan, also known as a Cross-State Air Pollution Plan, which is to improve downwind air quality, reduces smog farming pollution from power plants and industrial facilities in upwind states that endangers communities and families in downwind states. Next is the Mercury and Air Toxic Standards, also known as MATS, which require coal-fired power plants to reduce mercury pollution, acid gases, and other hazardous pollutants. Mercury pollution causes permanent damage to the brains of babies and developing fetuses, leading to developmental delays, learning disabilities, and birth defects. We also have the oil and gas methane pollution standard, which will expand and strengthen current limits on methane pollution for new, modified, and existing oil and natural gas operations. Methane is a powerful climate pollutant, more than 80 times more potent than carbon dioxide. And then lastly, for the EPA standards, we also have coal ash standards, which are a comprehensive set of requirements for safe disposal of coal ash from coal-fired power plants. Unsafe coal ash disposal in landfills or ponds can contaminate groundwater and surface water with toxic chemicals, pollute air with fugitive dust, and cause catastrophic spills. In addition, we also have standards that include cleaning up the transportation sector. So the heavy duty vehicles pollution standards, also named as HDV, are designed to reduce climate pollutants as well as smog and soot-forming nitrogen oxide, or NOx, that will help save lives and prevent asthma attacks, especially in undeserved neighborhoods near highways. We also have the cars and light trucks tailpipe pollution standards, which will ensure cleaner air by limiting climate pollution from passenger cars and trucks, and also incentivize manufacturers to make more electric vehicles in the future. Additionally, we also have standards that work with the economic power to limit climate risk and drive a cleaner marketplace for the economy, which includes a corporate climate risk disclosure rule proposed by the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, or the SEC, that requires standardized disclosure of information from publicly traded companies about their climate-related financial risks, including any targets and plans they have for reducing those risks, and annual progress reports on implementing those plans. Next, we have the Buy Clean federal procurement initiatives, which requires the federal government to use its vast purchasing power to buy climate-friendly materials like clean steel and cement, would reduce industrial emissions, support environmental justice, and create clean manufacturing jobs. We also have the household products standard, pollution standard, sorry, which will phase down production and consumption of the hydrofluorocarbon or HFCs in the US by 85% over the next 15 years and expected to avoid up to 0.5 degrees Celsius of warming by 2100. HFCs are one of the most potent of the greenhouse gases. And then lastly, we also have the appliance standards, and these incorporate a bunch of different various types of standards, including the stovetops, washer and dryers, and some furnaces, and some more to list a couple. And so when the EPA proposes a standard, it opens up a 60-day comment period. Some of you might remember last year submitting a comment to the EPA or even testifying in one of the many hearings that they held. And we appreciated the work that everyone kind of put in, voicing their opinions about the need for strong solutions for pollution standards. And then the EPA will take, once that period closes, EPA will read every single comment and also have an internal review session before announcing their final standard. And so when the EPA announces a final standard, we hope that it is strong enough where we can take a celebratory stance on the final standard. And that can look like engaging activists, having activists send thank you cards to President Biden and Administrator Regan, posting on social media, tagging President Biden and Administrator Regan, thanking for them for finalizing the strongest solution for pollution standards, also engaging with press and educating reporters so that they are reporting out factual information on the benefits of these strong standards, also hosting press events as relevant about the final standards, engaging with members of Congress so they come out publicly in support of the strong standards, and then as well as hosting and having some standard-specific tactics. For an example, and I'll dive a little bit deeper later on in this presentation, is we recently had the soot final standard. And so for that, because it had a lot of public health implications, we had a sign-on letter for public health professionals and health professionals, and we had over 160 public health professionals sign a thank you letter to President Biden and Administrator Regan for enacting strong SIT standards. And then we also encourage organizations to release statements celebrating these standards. Of course, this is all in a celebratory action if the standard that the EPA released is a strong standard. So the overarching goal for these celebratory actions is really to build momentum. We want to celebrate the success to put the wind in the Biden administration's sails. Wins begets more wins. If the Biden administration sees the vast amount of support from us, I suppose, like from activists, from organizers, and from the public, they'll be more courageous and maintain their high ambitions to enact stronger solutions for pollution standards further down the pipeline. We also want to make sure that we're drowning out the opposition. The Biden administration hears a lot loud and clear from polluters trying to weaken the critical solutions for pollution proposals. And so it is our job as activists, as organizers, and as public citizens to drive a clear narrative that the administration is protecting public health and cutting climate pollution, and that our groups and the public have their back. We also want to mobilize frontliners. Frontliners are members of Congress who are up for re-election that are in a seat that could be vulnerable during the election period. And so part of Biden's ambition hinges on the support of frontliners in Congress. And so we work with key members to ensure that they demonstrate public and private support for clean air and climate action. That might look at them releasing a public statement or even just posting on social media their support for the strong standard, as if President Biden sees this, he's going to be, again, more ambitious coming down the pipeline because he knows that the constituents that that member of Congress represents are also in favor for strong standards. And so to go in depth on one of the recently finalized standard, which was soot, EPA announced the final standard updating the National Ambient Air Quality Standards, also known as NAAQS, for particulate matter 2.5. On February 7th, and it updated from a level of 12 micrograms per cubic meter that was set in 2012 to 9 micrograms per cubic meter. And so in 2032, this means that it will prevent up to 4,500 premature deaths, 5,700 cases of new asthma onset, and 800,000 cases of asthma symptoms, as well as preventing 2,000 emergency room visits, and 290,000 lost work days, as well as have net benefits of $48 billion in 2032. So huge kind of benefits from this standard, and that is why we kind of took a very big celebration stance on this final standard. And so this is kind of an update on other kind of standards current play in the administration. So the methane was finalized back in the beginning of December. Soot, as I just mentioned, was in February. Washer and dryer standards, which are part of the appliance efficiency standards, are expected before the end of this month. Light duty vehicles as well as heavy duty vehicles standards are expected in March. And in carbon standard for power plants, as well as MATs, ELGs, and coal ash standards are expected in April. And so now we're going to go into Congressional Review Act. And so this is kind of the period after an agency like the EPA finalize a standard. And so what is a Congressional Review Act, or a CRA? Well, it's a tool Congress can use to roll back federal regulation with just a simple majority in the House and Senate. And so since a CRA was enacted in 1996 as part of the Small Business Regulatory Enforcement and Fairness Act, more than 200 joint resolutions of disapproval have been introduced, with 20 of those successfully overturning standards. And so the method was created by Newt Gingrich and Republicans in its contract with America, and it is an incredibly blunt and dangerous tool with the potential to eliminate significant environmental and public health protections. And so once a federal standard is finalized, Congress has 60 legislative days to use a CRA review tool. And so what a legislative day is it's different actually between the House and the Senate. And so it is quite difficult for people to really kind of comprehend, even like myself. And so for the House, it begins when the House reconvenes following an adjournment of whatever length and concludes when that chamber next adjourns. While for the Senate, a legislative day is when the Senate session is any calendar day on which the Senate meets, including in brief pro forma session. And because the House and the Senate both have different calendars, that's what makes it hard for us kind of really decipher what that length of period actually looks like. And so that is why, and I'll get to it later, part of the ask is to finalize all standards by May 1st. So that 60-day legislative period ends before 2025. As if a standard is finalized with less than 60 legislative days before Congress adjourns for the year, the clock resets and the new Congress has 60 legislative days to review. And that is why we want that May 1st, we have that May 1st deadline. And so our resolution of disapproval on a standard can be quickly brought up by any member of Congress and passed with a simple majority in both the House and Senate. And so it does not go through regular order like we see in other legislation, as it's usually done in an expedited manner, which bypasses the typical process of debate and transparency. So once a standard is repealed using the CRA, the standard is void and the agency cannot issue a substantially similar standard, again, without congressional approval. And so the big thing about CRA is it potentially having a chilling effect on the administration. The Biden administration will likely veto most of these repeals, as it was them that finalized the standard in the first place. However, these congressional actions, especially when Democrats support them, could slow the pace and weaken the outcome of subsequent regulatory actions in the administration. Um, the administration is working to finalize before the end of the 118th Congress. And so that is why timing is everything. A new Congress can review standards issued during a 60 legislative day window from the previous Congress. And so if a new administration is in the White House in 2025, and if Republicans control Congress, standards issued mid-2024 or later would be vulnerable to full repeal, which is what we do not want to see. And so, as I stated earlier, that is why that April 30th deadline is so critical, so that we do not run into that issue. And then this is just especially of the anticipated activity that we'll likely see from some of the EPA standards that have yet to come out, or methane and so have now both been published. And we have yet to see a CRA be introduced on the floor, but there is still plenty of time, as you can see by the orange bars, that there's plenty of time for CRA to be introduced. And so the methane was announced in December, soot was announced in February, clean car standards we are expecting in March, as well as a heavy duty vehicle standard, mercury and air toxics, as well as the carbon pollution from power plants, coal ash, and corporate climate risk disclosure are all expected to be announced in April, which opens up a CRA window until November or December. If it's moved into May, it'll potentially lead into 2025 or the new Congress. And so for an example, we did have the Good Neighbor plan had a CRA against it. The standard was finalized actually last year in March. And as a reminder, the Good Neighbor Plan protects communities across the country from air pollution, from power plants and other industrial sources traveling across state lines. And so in June, a CRA resolution was introduced to roll back the Biden administration's cross-state air pollution standard. And so I just want to highlight that difference, where that standard was finalized in March, but it still took a few months until a CRA was brought up. And then once that CRA was introduced, we asked members of Congress to stand strong and vote no on repealing the Good Neighbor Plan. And fortunately, the CRA was actually, or not fortunately, but the CRA never came to a floor vote, and the 60 legislative day window closed. And so to us, that was a big win, that we didn't even see that CRA come to a vote. And so it kind of just shows that even though it's introduced, it might not always come to a vote too. And so that's why once a CRA is introduced and we're not given quite a lot of time in advance to prep for that, it's a lot of kind of rapid response and kind of educating members on the Hill about why they should stand strong and vote no against the CRA. So that way, if it does come to a vote, we know that we can push back. There's strong support to push back against the CRA. And so one of the things that we are working with members and working with partners like Elders Climate Action is passing around the Biden Ambition petition. And so this is a QR scan code. You can use your phone. I believe there will be in chat as well a link to Elders Climate Action's link for the Biden Ambition petition. But the petition really calls on President Biden and EPA Administrator Regan to adopt the strongest possible solutions for pollution standards before that May 1st deadline, as well as also thanks President Biden for his the action that he has taken in his presidency for climate, like passing the Inflation Reduction Act, Also, the Justice 40, which ensures that 40% of all investments and funds benefits the disadvantaged kind of communities that are marginalized, underserved, and overburdened by pollution. And this is something that he had signed off right off the bat within a couple of days of being elected president, as well as a bipartisan infrastructure bill. We also think, and so really just a lot of work that he's done, but also calling for more, making sure that all standards that are under solutions for pollution are finalized according to our timeline. And the bottom message is really our health and our climate can't wait. It's time to act boldly now and swiftly to finalize and implement the strongest possible pollution standards by May 1st. That is all I have, so I will stop there and answer any questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Monty. That was so much information, so informative. And I think it's just really important to sort of understand how regulatory and legislative action has to work together, right? To really inform and to push forward the transition on the level, the scope and scale it needs to happen at. So thank you for sort of giving us that big picture of regulatory action, and that it's not just regulatory action happening at an EPA level. It's other agencies are involved in addressing air pollution. I know with some of these various appliance standards and things like that, right? So very interesting there. Let me start with a question for you about. I know that we have heavy duty trucks and clean cars rules currently in process, and I think currently at the Office of Management and Budget. And I'm wondering, do you have any sense at this point what we might expect coming out of those rules? We saw a pretty decent rule come out of soot. We saw, some substantial improvements on the previous rule, and methane before that was pretty decent improvements. What do we think we have coming into clean cars, clean trucks? Do you have any sense of that?
I unfortunately do not have any kind of sense of it. I know that there was I believe it's New York Times article that talked about weaker light duty vehicles. However, those rumors are really unconfirmed. And so unfortunately I don't. But I think it is just kind of showing up on like social media and kind of making sure that we make our presence known, that we are calling for strong kind of clean car and clean vehicle standards to the EPA, especially during this kind of final month, and kind of making sure that they are still hearing our voices, because we already know that if you guys have like televisions, there's a big push on polluter side to really kind of they're trying to push this false narrative that President Biden is wanting to put a ban on all gas vehicles. And that's not what this standard is doing. And that's very false. And so it's really kind of pushing back on those false narratives that we're seeing from the fossil fuel industry. And so I know Environmental Defense Fund, as well as Climate Power, are doing work. These are groups that we work with, are doing work to really push back against the narratives. And that's an important thing, is making sure that we're also educating kind of reporters, but also each other about the truth behind setting these strong standards and the public health implication, as well as sometimes the economic benefit that it has with these strong standards. So unfortunately, I don't have intel, but I think it's still critical for us to kind of be educated and also be aware that there are the opposition is trying to spread these false narratives to the public.
And we saw a lot of that opposition on soot and on methane, and a lot of the industry come out and really try to push back. And so I can imagine we'll see a lot of that, especially around transportation.
Yeah. Yeah, we've seen it ramp up even just in 2024, like alone, like January, you could just see it kind of as the month went along, and now we're in February. It's just the kind of them just ramping up the opposition, the messaging that they're trying to spread. And a lot of it is false narratives.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why it's so critical for us to keep adding our voice to that. Keep sending those messages to Biden, keep sending those messages to EPA, asking for the strongest standards possible. So we'll keep asking you all out there to send those comments and to send those letters. Um, can you comment at all on how the public can best defend adopted EPA standards that are subjected to court challenges? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Um, I don't think I can directly answer that. I'm not quite like a policy expert. And so if I'm curious if they're talking about like kind of the Chevron deference as well as what we saw in West Virginia, kind of ruling last summer. And I can kind of talk a little bit about that. Um,
And I think also in there being the good neighbor plan before the Supreme Court now also. So I think there's a few different, I would imagine we're kind of picking up on a few different threads that are agency related um, threads showing up in the Supreme Court.
can you repeat that quickly? Just
Yeah, if how we can best defend EPA standards that are being subjected to Supreme Court challenges.
Um, yeah, I think I would say definitely like talking to like a member of Congress and kind of encouraging them to come out in a positive stance is tough with courts because they're not quite they work differently compared to our member of Congress compared to the executive branch. But I still think you can kind of like what we've done in the past, especially for West Virginia, kind of be outside, out in the streets, kind of calling in defense of these standards, publicly voicing your support, as well as calling on your member of Congress to advocate for supporting these standards. And I also want to kind of talk a little bit about like the Chevron deference and as well as West Virginia, because so Chevron deference, it refers to a principle that when federal judges are resolving disputes about the meaning of federal regulatory statutes, they should defer a reasonable interpretation offered by the agency that Congress tasked with the administering, the statute. And so there is a case right now, Chevron versus NRDC, and so the principle of Chevron deference predates the Chevron decision, and the court said it was applying principles that it had already articulated, but spent more time elaborating on the reasons of the difference. And so the big thing about Chevron deference is it gives the power for the agency, more power to the agency compared to the courts. And so if Chevron deference is overruled, it actually flips that and gives federal courts more power over the agency. And so this is like a big issue that we're seeing. It's coming to the courts. I believe it started now. They're starting to hear, and it's kind of an ongoing case now, and it will be probably expecting a ruling, I believe, in late July, but don't want to be quoted on that. However, in a more positive spin, like because of the West Virginia ruling last year, the Biden administration is kind of been on the lookout and kind of looking down the pipeline and has been expecting this opposition, especially in the Supreme Court, that is kind of 6-3 on kind of political lines. And so they have, when releasing these standards, looked at what if Chevron deference is overruled. And so a lot of these standards that we are seeing now wouldn't be implicated completely, and wouldn't really change if Chevron deference is overruled. And there is a lot of other kind of organizations that are kind of working on that. I think Earth Justice and as well as Sierra Club have a lot of kind of resources out there and kind of showing research about Chevron deference, and would be able to go much more in depth than I unfortunately am able to.
Well, and my understanding with Chevron deference is it's not just impacting agencies like Environmental Protection Agency, but it would actually be impacting all agencies. So the ability to
Yes.
regulate all things would be my understanding. And so I would imagine that if that were to be overturned, that is a huge impact to all of us as human beings at every level beyond climate. So, I just think of all the things where there's regulations, like, just our food packaging, or, those types of things are really important pieces of regulation that could potentially get turned over to judges versus experts. So I think very something to stay on top of, I think.
Stay on top of, yeah, and it's a whole kind of rabbit hole that I'm sure people maybe even on this kind of call would be able to talk for hours about. And so yeah, definitely something to kind of keep in mind and kind of educate and kind of learn more about as the court case kind of grows into going into the summer.
Yeah, and I think a big thing that for us to do as climate activists is just continue to try to be in the know about it. I don't think there's any specific action that we can take right now. There's, as Monty said, just there's not a lot of pathway to influencing judges. But I think the more we can be talking about it and raising awareness about it, and then the more we can be sort of calling on members of Congress and Biden administration to help protect our climate future, the better, I think, overall. Um, let's see. I'm trying to get through. There's a lot of questions about Supreme Court. One question in the thread here on why nothing about factory farming in relationship to methane and agribusiness. So big push for environmental credits given to mega agribusiness to invest in anaerobic digesters, which sounds good, but really increased pollution. CAC's involvement in, has CAC thought about sort of the agribusiness and the larger sort of methane production from farming? Is that an area that CAC works on at all in relationship to addressing air pollution?
Not quite. I mean, have begun doing more work with like the Farm Bill, but that's not quite regulatory. Has some aspects that are regulatory, from like the Inflation Reduction Act that has invested just under $20 billion for climate smart ag. However, yeah, we don't do too much with agro within like the regulatory system. I mean, I think unfortunately, there's so much going on with climate. It's such a multifaceted kind of issue. And so really it's kind of no organization can kind of take everything. And so our steering committee kind of that's made up of, as I mentioned, like Earth Justice, Environment Defense Fund, NRDC kind of got together and selected that these were kind of the most critical, and looking at what Biden promised, what President Biden promised us back in 2020. These are the most, to us, we saw very significant in getting to that cutting climate pollution in half by 2030. And I'm sure that there are groups out there that focus on kind of more the agricultural aspect because it is a very important thing, but we at CAC don't quite focus on that.
Understandable. Yeah, it is a big field out there in terms of all the moving parts and all the places where climate action is critical and climate solutions will be implemented. and I know in terms of Farm Bill, as of right now, the Farm Bill was extended. My understanding is I think it's extended through September of 2024. And there's pieces of the Farm Bill that are also funded by the Inflation Reduction Act for climate-related solutions. And so that's why the Farm Bill is important in these climate conversations and keeps coming up. But also we know that we need to address these things related to farming and to address things like air pollution and greenhouse gas emissions. So it's all part of that interwoven web, if you will. Let's see, there's a question here on if you have any idea on anything about the status of the revision of the ozone standard. Is that anything you know anything about?
Yeah, so this was unfortunately in August, last August, so in 2023, the EPA announced that it was abandoning the current rulemaking process. And so EPA isn't going to be releasing a proposed standard or even a final standard. They're going to revisit it in 2025 and beyond. I know Earth Justice kind of put out a lot of statements on this announcement back in August. And so I think if you go on Earth Justice's website, they'll have like information about like the work that they're doing to kind of counter it, because it was a disappointment because it was on one of our standards that we were working on. And yes, in August, EPA came out and saying they're delaying the rulemaking and will revisit it in 2025 and beyond.
Yeah, it's too bad. It's too bad it got delayed.
Yes.
And hopefully we don't see that happen with others. Hopefully we can keep all these other standards on track and see those all through. So we do need to keep pushing there. Let's see. Francis or Ariana or anybody back there, am I missing any important questions in the chat or in anywhere else? Or does anybody have any last questions for Monty? I think we've made it through a majority of our questions.
Jen, I would ask, I mean, Monty pointed to a number of, EPA rules we're expecting to see come out in the next couple of months. And I wondered if there were specific strategies, things that we citizens or organizations can be doing at this point. And, if there are resources we can go to.
Yes. So I will pull up. We're still like in the process of still like celebrating. Just making sure it's correct. And so we're still in the process of celebrating the SOOT standard that was released. And so CAC has actually released this final like SOOT announcement toolkit. And it's one of the things that we're working on 2024 and really driving our narrative this upcoming year. And so essentially it's just 3 quick actions that you can take. It's mainly focused on social media. However, it does also have like some messaging toolkits and messaging like talking points that people can use and kind of learn more about the effects that the SOOT standard will have on the public. And so, yeah, the 3P is kind of will have it's 1 key fact, and then 2 like the hashtag, and then the tagging for if you're posting on social media, as well as a graphic to go alongside it. So that's one thing that we still have ongoing, and we'll kind of be releasing our messaging around various rules, various standards. Once they are announced, we always have like messaging. I know one of kind of another campaign that we work quite closely to is Clean Vehicles campaign, and they're doing a lot of work in around the heavy duty and light duty vehicles that is expected in March. So they're another kind of site to go to. I'm trying to think any other actions. Big thing is also like when a standard is announced, like we'll, as I mentioned, kind of be spreading out messaging, talking points with Elders Climate Action, as well as various other partners that we work with. And where we encourage them to spread it with their with their members. And so kind of keeping an eye out for that. And those will have kind of ways you can take action. And we encourage, like, if you're a part of an organization, to release statements, as I mentioned in the slideshow, on the standard. And so we also kind of release messaging toolkits to help your organization create those kind of that statement for the standard. I'm trying to think if there's any other thing. I mean, you can, I don't know if someone has already put into the chat, but usually on our website, if you go into our priorities, and I'll post the link in the chat. I hope everyone can see it. Oh, no.
We can make sure.
There we go. Yeah. So this is a link to our website and our priorities for the solutions for pollution. And this will be kind of updated with kind of some toolkits, as well as like guides on what I just kind of had talked about in this presentation. And also will be, sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, we will be sending out a newsletter at the beginning of March. And in that newsletter, you can look there for a comment to EPA and Biden administration on finalizing heavy duty vehicles and clean cars. So we are preparing that comment as we speak for you to be able to submit to Biden and EPA.
Fantastic. That's awesome to hear. And yeah, it's like also like, we'll also like have like thank you cards that we encourage members to send out, or slightly variants. It all really depends. It all depends on the type of standard that the EPA released. And so we are kind of fortunate with the soot standard that they released kind of quite a strong standard. And so we were able to celebrate it. And so we're hoping that we made such an impact with those that celebration that the Biden administration is encouraged to kind of counter what the polluters are trying to push, and keep on kind of putting out strong standards according to their set timeline.
I see a couple other little things in the comments that I want to just hit on. One is, so somebody asks, is there any time of the year when it's useful to have members and activities in DC to come visit Congress and Senate? Is there any specific key moments in the year that you feel like are really important to do that? And then I see somebody else, Dwight, and I second you. He suggests visiting local legislators' office, your local legislator's office, and for more impact. And I think, yes, the other thing you can also do is virtual visits now too. Those are totally a thing. So you can call and request a virtual visit, as Francis suggested in the Zoom. But any sense, Monty, good time, is there a good time of the year to be doing this type of work?
In DC or within district?
I would say let's say both. Let's give answers to both.
So, I mean, this year is a little slightly odd because it is an electoral year. And so Congress has a lot of time off for members of Congress to head back to their districts or states to kind of do more like electoral work. And so if you're in district, that is a great opportunity to kind of engage with your member of Congress. And be on the lookout for local organizations as well as like for Elders Climate Action. If you're Arizona based, we'll be doing a lot of events, press events, as well as some community events. And so we always encourage people to show up to those. I know in Arizona, Phoenix, Arizona, Earth Day, we will be hosting a major rally in Phoenix, as well as if you're Pennsylvania, we'll also be hosting one in Philadelphia. And so encourage you to show up to those. We could see potentially members of Congress, but also we'll see state legislators and local electeds at those events. And so we host a lot of events in some of those states. We mainly focus on Arizona, Nevada, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Georgia. Those are the 6 states that we host events in. And so kind of keep an eye out for those. And kind of going back, because I realize I kind of digress a little bit. For DC, it's a little hard, but like State of the Union's coming up in March 7th. And so members of Congress will all be in DC then. So that's a great time period. The appropriations process is going on kind of still right now, where we're still looking at a potential government shutdown. Been kind of looking at one since last September. It feels like eternity. And so like they're still kind of trying to do a lot of like, the funding levels for agency work. And so it's integral kind of work to make sure that they don't cut federal agencies funding, especially for us, it's like the EPA, Department of Energy, Department of Transportation, but really we don't want to see any cuts. So really making sure that you're calling members of Congress and asking them not to cut. And then, yeah, I wouldn't recommend kind of that lame duck and also like leading up to the election in DC. They're not going to be spending a lot of time in DC. And then the lame duck, which is what we call like after like election period, which is November and December period. Not much is going on. And so this year is really the best year for in district, meeting with members of Congress, educating them within district. And that's all I'd say about that.
And if you want to find out if your member of Congress is in district, you can do a quick little Google search for Senate calendar or House calendar, and you can see the tentative calendar. I know I was just checking the other day to try to figure out when my senators were in the state. And it's not always 100% accurate. There is some changes and some flexibility in the schedule, but at least gives you some sense of when they might be in your home district. So great time to try to get a meeting with them. I think that about does it. We had one last question here that I found that is specific to EVs, and I don't know if you'll be able to answer this question or not, Monty, but you may have sort of you have your ear to the wall about many things. So rules for domestic content in EVs changed in late 2023. Some EVs fell out of the $7,500 credit category out of the Inflation Reduction Act. For those of you that aren't familiar, is there any news on EV manufacturers changing designs to requalify for full purchase credit? Is that anything you've heard anything about?
I have not. However, there are a lot like toys, some things I can talk about for that. There are still a lot of cars that fall within the tax rebates. And so definitely there's lists out there that you can find. There are also car manufacturers where they might not qualify. However, they themselves have like a deal that you can kind of utilize, because it's all competition in that kind of corporate America, I guess you could say. And so they understand that they might lose out on those tax rebates. However, they might then have their own set of kind of deals, car deals where you can get a couple thousand off. I know from personal experience, I had family that purchased an electric vehicle, and they got a free installation of the car charging in for their house. And so that saved my family kind of a couple thousand dollars, which was amazing. And so kind of even though some EVs might not fall under that bracket, they usually also have deals that will still save you money. And I would say, I'm trying to think of the group, believe it's Environmental Defense Fund and Climate Power have like research, and they've created a report on kind of the costs of EVs and how over time it is still significant. It's still cheaper to invest in a electric vehicle than it is for your traditional gas powered vehicle. And so they have a bunch of reports out there explaining that. So I'd highly recommend going onto Environmental Defense Fund website as well as Climate Power to learn more about that.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Monty, for joining us tonight, just sharing all of your knowledge. You are a bank of knowledge, and we appreciate all the knowledge that Climate Action Campaign brings to Elders Climate Action. And if you haven't already, you can put some appreciation for Monty in the chat. And if you haven't already, please sign the Biden petition. We're going to follow up tomorrow with a recording of this call and email with some of the links that we've talked about today. And yeah, we are very thankful to have your time tonight and this afternoon. I keep saying tonight. And thank you to everybody for joining us this afternoon. Have a great rest of your afternoon and evening.